הפודקאסט בחסות דאטה מדיה, המלווה ומייעצת לחברות בארץ ובחול בנושא אימייל מרקטינג, אווירות אימיילים ובחירה והטמעה של מערכות דיוור.
CRM.Buzz, בלוג ופודקאסט בנושאי ניהול קשרי לקוחות, חוויית לקוח, שיווק, שימור לקוחות, טכנולוגיה ודאטה. מגיש סלע יופי.
I think it's really difficult to kill an email program. I mean, one of the kind of sad truths about email marketing is that you can do email marketing like kind of not all that well and still generate like a decent ROI. It's sort of sad. It means that a lot of brands like leave a lot of money on the table. People settling for good enough. They're like, oh, that's good enough, especially if they're comparing it to, their TV or radio ads or other traditional channels. The ROI on email is so strong that a lot of people are like, oh, all right, that's great. Email's not on fire. Email's doing fantastic, so we'll just turn our attention over to these other channels that are really struggling, and let's invest a lot of money there. That's the opposite of what I would do.
אתם על CRM.Buzz. ועכשיו?
בוקר טוב לצ'אד ווייט, מחבר הספר אימייל מרקטינג רולס, שיצא עתה במהדורה רביעית מורחבת, ו-Head of Research בענקית הטכנולוגיה, Oracle Marketing Consulting. בוקר טוב, צ'אד.
Thanks for having me, Sel. I appreciate it.
Sure.
אני תמיד שואל את האורחים שלי איך הם התחילו לעסוק באימייל. חלקם אומרים שהם נפלו לתוך האימייל. זה פשוט קרה. איך אתה התחלת?
Yeah, so, I sort of fell in as well, but I did make some very conscious decisions to get into the email marketing space. So I'm a journalist by training, and I worked for years for Condé Nast and Dow Jones. And as part of our coverage of retailers, where I spent a lot of my time, retail and technology, we signed up for retailers' email marketing programs because they would talk about, new initiatives for their companies, new web and other types of initiatives, and we would use those for leads to then follow up with them. And the turning point for me was that my brother started a blog. This was like mid-2000s when blogs were still pretty fresh and new and exciting. And he started a blog, and as a younger competitive brother, I said, well, if my brother can start a blog, I can totally start a blog. And I thought, well, what would I blog about? And I was like, I already get all of these emails from retailers. I find that interesting. I'm in my inbox all the time looking at these things. Let me blog about that. And so I started the retail email blog, and I tracked over 100 of the top online retailers every day, pretty much. 6 days a week, I was blogging about what I was seeing in my inbox, and doing a lot of sort of quant analysis of how many emails were being sent by brands, when they sent them, the most popular days, and that kind of stuff. And I got the attention of some folks in the email marketing community, and I got hired by the Email Experience Council. I was employee number 3 there as it was just getting started, and I've never looked back, and it's been the best decision of my life. The email marketing community is fantastic. I really love it, and I love the fact that email marketing is constantly evolving and changing and adapting. So I love change, and email marketing has delivered that for me. Always there's a new story.
אפשר לומר שגם אני נפלתי לאימייל, אומר לי צ'אד ווייט. הייתי עיתונאי וכיסיתי את ענף הריטייל והטכנולוגיה. חלק ממה שעשינו היה להירשם לדיבורים של כל הגופים האלה. נקודת המפנה מבחינתי הייתה כשאח שלי הקים בלוג, משהו שהיה חדש בתחילת שנות ה-2000. כאח תחרותי אמרתי לעצמי שאם אח שלי יכול לבנות בלוג, גם אני יכול. כששאלתי את עצמי על מה אני יכול לכתוב, החלטתי לדווח על כל האימיילים שקיבלתי בנושא ריטייל וטכנולוגיה מכל אותם גופים. עשיתי ניתוח על 100 המובילים ודיווחתי על כל מה שקיבלתי לתיבת האימייל שלי. כך כתבתי 6 ימים בשבוע. כמה אימיילים הגיעו, מה היו הימים הפופולריים לדיבור וכדומה. זה תפס את עינם של אנשים מתעשיית האימייל. כך גם קיבלתי את העבודה הראשונה שלי בתחום, אני חושב שזו ההחלטה הכי טובה שקיבלתי. קהילת האימייל מרקטינג היא נהדרת, והערוץ הזה משתנה כל הזמן. תמיד יש משהו חדש ומעניין. כעת אתה באורקל.
Yeah, so now I'm at Oracle Marketing Consulting. We're a full-service global digital marketing agency inside of Oracle. We assist a lot of the biggest brands in the world with their digital marketing programs. We do a lot of email marketing. It's probably about 80% of what we do. But we also do SMS and mobile and push, browser push and mobile push. And do a lot of web work as well. But certainly email marketing is absolutely our home base. And I'm really fortunate to work with some really talented folks in creative and strategy and deliverability. And it's just great. I mean, I know a lot, but I work with some people who are truly experts, in their specialty, and it's great to be around them. I'm constantly learning new things.
אנחנו קבוצת ייעוץ פנימית בתוך אורקל. סדר גודל של 80% ממה שאנחנו עושים הוא אימייל מרקטינג. כל השאר זה SMS ופוש ודיגיטל ועבודה על אתרים של לקוחות. אנחנו עובדים עם הגופים הגדולים ביותר בעולם. יש אצלנו אנשים מאוד מוכשרים, מאווירות דרך קריאייטיב ואסטרטגיה. אני עובד עם אנשים שהם המומחים ביותר בתחומם, ואני כל הזמן לומד מהם דברים חדשים. כתבת למעלה מ-4,000 מאמרים. זה מספר מדהים. אני אולי כתבתי 400 במהלך 4 השנים האחרונות. איך אתה מקבל את כל הרעיונות האלה למאמרים?
Yeah, so it really is a ridiculous number of blog posts. And, I got about 2,500 of those over 8.5 years of writing the retail email blog, where again, I was blogging almost every day. And a lot of those blog posts were on the short side. A lot of the blog posts I write now are quite lengthy. So my blogging strategy currently is very, very different than what it was early when, I was writing posts that were, 200-300 words very routinely. I just wrote a blog post, with a lot of other people about generative AI for text that was 2,700 words, which I think a lot of people would say, that's not really a blog post, that's a white paper. But those are the kinds of deep dives that we now currently do on topics, especially really complicated topics like generative AI. But, so how do I do it? I think, having various strategies over time and trying to make sure you're matching the content and the content length to what's appropriate for that. And don't artificially try to inflate or cut things off. We just try to write, I try to write as many words as is necessary to explore a topic. And, in terms of where I get the ideas, again, I feel like there's things are always changing and shifting. And frankly, one of the most helpful things that, I currently do is I talk to our consultants who are in constant contact with our clients, and our clients have questions. And if we have more than one of our clients asking about something that we don't have a point of view on yet, that's a sign that, hey, maybe this is something we should write about. And that's one of the cool things about my job currently, is that it is largely kind of client-driven. And so we're able to create content, and a point of view that we share with our clients, and then we repurpose that and share it out to the email marketing community and the digital marketing community. So I have sort of a dual-facing role, which is fantastic. We're able to kind of serve both, internal and external audiences.
במהלך התקופה שכתבתי את הבלוג בנושא ריטייל, כתבתי כ-2,500 מאמרים יחסית קצרים. המאמרים שאני כותב כיום, לפעמים הם מאמרים הרבה יותר כבדים שאפשר לקרוא להם אפילו white papers. מבחינתי אורך המאמרים מנסה להתאים את עצמו לצורך, אני לא מקצר ולא מעריך שלא לצורך. הרבה מהרעיונות שלי מתקבלים דרך שיח עם יועצים שלנו באורקל או ישירות עם לקוחות, זה מאפשר לי לקבל רעיונות על נושאים שצריך לחסות אותם במאמרים חדשים. הספר שלך, Email Marketing Rules, יצא כעת במהדורה רביעית, מורחבת. יש אנשים שקוראים לו התנ"ך של אימייל מרקטינג. ספר על הספר, אני יודע שאתה לא משוחד, אבל למה כדאי לאנשים לקרוא דווקא את הספר שלך?
So,
And
I
you're
do
not
believe...
biased, I know.
Yeah, I'm a little biased. There are some other really good books about email marketing on the market too. So mine's not the only one, but I do think that mine's the most comprehensive, and I think that's why a lot of people like it. I mean, it's now, the 4th edition is now in 2 volumes, which is kind of crazy that it's in 2 volumes now. But that's how much more
That's my next
complicated
question.
things.
Why two? Why two?
Why so many words about email marketing? So, I mean, it's sort of 2 things. I mean, part of it is that, and I've released now over the last 10 years 4 editions. So it's almost to the month. The 4th edition was 10 years after the first, but the 2nd edition came out I think it was 18 months after the first, and then the 3rd was 2.5 years after the 2nd. So it's been almost 6 years between the 3rd and the 4th edition, which is more of a normal period of time. But part of the reason is that I've been learning more and more. So as much as I love that I am a part of people's email marketing journeys, everybody is sort of a part of my email marketing journey too. I'm constantly learning more, perfecting the ways of talking about topics, and then also is sort of expanding on topics that have been around for a while that I just didn't cover in past editions. But a lot of what's different between the 3rd and the 4th edition is that there's also a lot of change. There's a ton of things that didn't exist when the 3rd edition was published back in 2017.
Such as?
Dark mode didn't exist. Schema didn't exist. AMP for email didn't exist. BME didn't exist. Mail privacy protection didn't exist. Generative AI didn't exist. There's a lot of brand new things that email marketers need to take account of. And that's part of the reason why it's now quite a bit bigger.
יש בשוק לא מעט ספרים טובים על אימייל מרקטינג. אני חושב שהספר שלי הוא הנרחב ביותר, אולי זו הסיבה שבגללה אנשים מחבבים אותו. במהלך 10 השנים האחרונות שחררתי 4 מהדורות של הספר הזה. המהדורה השלישית שוחררה ב-2017, והרביעית יצאה זה עתה לשוק ב-2023. במשך השנים אני כל הזמן מתעדכן ומשתכלל. הספר הזה על מהדורותיו השונות משקף את המסע האישי שלי, המסע שאני עובר באימייל מרקטינג. יש נושאים שלא כיסיתי במהדורות הקודמות, יש המון דברים שהשתנו במרוצת השנים, ודברים רבים שנוספו שלא היו קיימים קודם לכן. הם לא הוזכרו במהדורה האחרונה, למשל נושאים כמו AMP for Email, או Apple MPP, או סקימה, או Dark Mode, גם Generative AI, לא היה קיים במהדורה השלישית. זו חלק מהסיבה שהמהדורה הרביעית נרחבת יותר.
Now, I think the other part of your question is why are there 2? Why isn't one giant book? And part of it is just it's easier to handle 2 the smaller books. That's part of it. But there is a very logical division between the 2. So the first edition of Email Marketing Rules was just rules. It was 120 rules at that time, and that was the entirety of the book. And volume 1 of the 4th edition is very much in that vein. It's 184 rules, and that's pretty much it. So it's very focused on the rules. And the great thing about dividing it up in that way is that the rules are very tactical. It's really kind of designed for email marketing specialists, folks who are down in the weeds, to be able to kind of audit their program and audit their own knowledge and kind of go topic by topic, subtopic by subtopic, and build their knowledge and build their programs. Really very tactical, drilling down to see, all right, on welcome emails, how can I make my program better? Okay, on email signups, how can I make my program better? And just very, very specific. And one of the cool things about the 4th edition is that volume 1, all of the rules now have exercises that go along with each of the rules to help marketers apply the rule to their program. And so it's, for instance, here, let me just share something real quick. So rule number 111 is pay extra attention to the top portion of your email that appears above the fold and ensure that it's well branded. And I include a bunch of information about what you should pay attention to, what should kind of be in this space. And I think in just reading the rule, you might think, oh yeah, I think we do that. So the exercise is to go and look at your emails, over the past month, and really pay attention to each email, like what is appearing before I scroll. And it's kind of taking that concept and then directly applying it to your program where you can start to see the disconnect. So that's one of the exciting things about Volume 1 now.
הספר נקרא Email Marketing Rules, ויש חלוקה לוגית ברורה בין שני החלקים של הספר. החלק הראשון של המהדורה הרביעית כולל 184 חוקים ומיועד לאנשי אימייל מרקטינג שמעוניינים להיכנס לטקטיקה ולשפר תהליכים שונים בתוכניות האימייל מרקטינג שלהם. מה שהוספתי במהדורה הרביעית הוא נושא של תרגול לכל אחד מהחוקים. התרגול מאפשר לעשות סוג של צ'קליסט שבאמת מאפשר לשפר את התהליכים על ידי בחינת הצ'קליסט לאורך זמן.
So, and then volume 2 is much more about sort of frameworks, kind of pulling all the rules back together and showing you how they all interconnect around big concepts and big goals. And there are some really great, really long checklists, like multi-page checklists that are about, email marketing metrics, about automation, all the different kinds of potential triggers that you can have for your program, all the different sort of acquisition sources you can have and what you should be paying attention to regarding each one. So a lot of great detail, but it's at the strategy level. So while Volume 1 is great for like that specialist who's kind of down in the weeds, Volume 2 is much more for, hopefully some VPs of marketing, some CMOs, folks who often don't have like a big picture knowledge of how email marketing works. Volume 2 will give them all of that information that they need. And then my hope, though, is certainly that most people get both volumes. So if you are a director of email marketing, if you are a manager of email marketing, if you aspire to be either of those things, if you aspire to be, or you're currently running an email marketing program, it probably makes a ton of sense for you to get both, because you need both tactics and the deep dive, and you need the strategy and understanding the big picture. So that's how the two volumes kind of break out.
החלק השני של הספר נכנס להרבה מאוד נושאים ברמה האסטרטגית ומחבר את החוקים יחד לתוכניות גדולות. יש צ'קליסט על פני עמודים שלמים, אוטומציות וטריגרים, מקורות מידע ועוד הרבה מאוד נושאים ברמה האסטרטגית. כלומר, אם אני מנסה לבדל בין שני החלקים, החלק הראשון הוא יותר טקטי למי שמתפעלים את האימייל מרקטינג, והחלק השני הרבה יותר אסטרטגי. מי שרוצים להעמיק, כדאי שירכשו את שני החלקים. אתה עובד עם המותגים הגדולים ביותר בעולם. רציתי לשאול אותך איזה עצה אתה יכול לתת למותגים קטנים יותר, למתחילים, איך הם יכולים ללמוד לעשות אימייל מרקטינג מוצלח.
Yeah, that's a major challenge for email marketers, because even people who have marketing degrees, they probably weren't taught maybe anything about email marketing during their time in university, which is kind of astounding at this point, considering how long email marketing has been around, the fact that 90+% of all businesses use email marketing, but it's not really taught at university at all, despite the fact that there's like entire courses on social media marketing in a lot of cases, which I think most of that knowledge is probably obsolete by the time they graduate, since it seems to change so rapidly. So it really is it's a challenge, and certainly I hope that folks use resources like my book. I hope that folks go to conferences. There are some online courses that you can take. Certainly, there is one of the things I really love about our community is that there are so many people who are willing to share, their knowledge, and there's lots of great blogs out there that folks should be reading. There's really active communities on Twitter and the Email Geeks Slack channel.
Yeah.
Some really great communities where people are like very open with sharing. So it really is on email marketers to constantly be reading and sort of re-educating themselves. And certainly my hope, my role in this, at least with the book, is to hopefully give people sort of a solid underpinning of knowledge and to help fill some gaps that they might have. But the thing that's super important to recognize is that you mentioned that we work with like some of the biggest brands, and we do. We work with some really sophisticated, complicated brands, but they're always hiring new people too that are coming in fresh into email marketing. And those people, also need to like bring their knowledge up. And so there's always this new audience of new people who are coming in and don't have great knowledge, and they need to learn the basics and understand how this channel is different from other channels. And hopefully my book can supply that kind of knowledge.
גם מי שעשו תואר בשיווק לא לומדים אימייל מרקטינג. זה די מוזר, לאור זה שאימייל מרקטינג הוא ערוץ כל כך ותיק, ורוב העסקים משתמשים בו. הרבה מאוד דברים שלומדים באימייל מרקטינג מחזיקים את מבחן הזמן. לעומת זאת, הרבה דברים שלומדים באוניברסיטה שקשורים למדיה חברתית או לשיווק דיגיטלי הופכים ללא רלוונטיים תוך זמן קצר. כמובן שאפשר ללמוד מהספר שלי או מספרים אחרים, יש קורסים ובלוגים, יש קהילה בטוויטר, מה שקוראים לו היום X, יש את האימייל גיקס צ'אנל בסלאק וקהילות מקומיות, הרבה אנשים בקהילות האימייל מרקטינג אוהבים לעזור לאנשים אחרים. גם המותגים הגדולים, כמו אלו שאנחנו עובדים איתם באורקל, מגייסים כל הזמן אנשים חדשים. האנשים האלה צריכים לרכוש את הידע איפשהו. הספר שלי, וכמובן גם מקורות אחרים שהזכרתי, יוכלו לעזור להם. תמיד אמרנו שלאימייל יש 7 נשמות, הוא הערוץ הוותיק ביותר. מצד שני, ערוצים דיגיטליים קמו, ערוצים דיגיטליים נפלו, יש עכשיו חזרה מן המתים של ה-SMS, לפחות בארצות הברית. פה בישראל וואטסאפ הפך להיות השחקן החדש והמעניין, כערוץ ישיר מול לקוחות. מה דעתך על זה?
Someone is always trying to kill email marketing. Yeah, so, email marketing is, it's such a great thing to kick, right? Like, because it's owned by lots of different companies, not by one. Yeah. So you can kick email just as hard as you want, and email doesn't say you're wrong, right? Like, no one is speaking up for email. There's no voice, right? So, yeah, it's so fun to kick, right? You've had Facebook Messenger, like folks at Facebook saying Facebook Messenger, that's gonna kill email. Google Wave was supposed to kill email, and Slack was supposed to kill email. I even heard one time that RSS was supposed to kill email. I think everyone realizes again how ridiculous these statements are now. That you're right. Like email, has, I think, way more than 9 lives. And the thing that makes it really powerful is that it's always adapting. It's not one thing. The email certainly the email marketing of the year 2000 has nothing in common with the email marketing of today. It's always changing in really significant ways. Back in 2005, there was no mobile email besides BlackBerry, but there's no mobile HTML email. And then, the iPhone came along and radically changed, email experiences. So it's always adapting. I am intensely skeptical of any walled garden that says that they're going to defeat email. So WhatsApp would be another one of these walled gardens where they control everything. These platforms have demonstrated to be unstable, highly mutable, subject to radical change, like again and again. I mean, just look at what's happening with Twitter right now. You know, anybody who's invested a ton in Twitter is now just wringing their hands big time because they see all of that investment is at risk.
Yeah.
So I think everybody has to be super careful anytime. It's not that they shouldn't invest in walled gardens, but if you put all your eggs in a basket that you don't own in any way, you've opened yourself up to tremendous risk. So you have to just understand what those risks are. But I'm deeply skeptical of any, you know, private messaging system that's owned by one company being able to dethrone email, because I feel like that's the thing that makes email amazing and awesome, is that nobody owns it. And it's like this distributed network, you know, this open platform. And that's what makes it, you know, highly accessible, inexpensive, used almost universally. And, you know, the walled gardens can't touch it. Like even, you know, like Facebook, you know, in its heyday, and I know it's, you know, it's still really, really, really big, but email marketing is still, like, email is still way bigger than Facebook. So, and that's because it's inherently more stable.
אימייל הוא ערוץ מבוזר. כל פעם שנולד ערוץ ישיר חדש, SMS, וואטסאפ, סלאק, גוגל וייב ואחרות, כל פעם הספידו את האימייל מרקטינג. כולם ניסו להרוג אותו. כמובן שאימייל מרקטינג כיום שונה לחלוטין מאימייל שנעשה לפני 20 שנה. הרבה מאוד דברים השתנו, בין השאר בחוויה שאימייל נותן. וואטסאפ ופלטפורמות אחרות הן פלטפורמות סגורות, שהוכיחו לאורך השנים שהן לא יציבות, עם שינויים תכופים. תראו מה קורה עכשיו בטוויטר, שנקראת נכון להיום X. אנשים שהשקיעו שם שוברים את הראש מה יהיה עם ההשקעה שלהם. אני די סקפטי, אומר לי צ'אד ווייט, שפלטפורמה ריכוזית של מסרים מיידיים, מדהימה ככל שתהיה, תהרוג את האימייל. אימייל יותר גדול מפייסבוק, דווקא היותו של אימייל גן פתוח, הוא אחד מיתרונותיו.
Yeah, every channel has their own strengths and weaknesses. I agree. Well, one of the nice things about email marketing is that it is asynchronous and not highly interruptive in most cases, which is very, very different to, say, an SMS or, you know, mobile push or, you know, lots of messaging platforms where they're automatically pushing, you know, that to your phone and interrupting whatever you're doing. So I see that as, like, you know, really, you know, I don't know if that doesn't make it better. It just makes it different, right? Like it's not email versus anything, but that is one of the features of email that certainly accounts for, you know, the higher messaging volumes and such. Like, you know, there is a lot of talk about people getting overwhelmed with messages, and certainly people talk about getting overwhelmed with email, but most people don't really subscribe to a lot of brands' messages. It's very small. Like, people don't have, you know, 100 favorite brands. They've got like 10. And so, and the other thing that's, I think, is important to understand about email is that a lot of people, when they know they want to engage with a brand, they then go to their inbox and search. And they're like, let me see what, you know, my favorite brand has been talking about. Let's see, you know, what the discounts are. You know, like, they know when they're in the market. So, you know, there's certainly a lot of people who are, you know, engaging with their inbox, you know, day in and day out, and seeing those messages and making decisions about what to engage with and what not to. But there's also a ton of people that they sign up for those emails because they love that brand, but they don't want to see those emails every day, and they're very happy for it to be in their promo tab or some folder that they've shunted them into. And when they're ready to engage with that brand, then they go and they see, all right, what are they talking about right now? So I kind of like that on-demand kind of feature where it's not in your face constantly.
אחד מיתרונותיו של אימייל מרקטינג הוא שהוא ערוץ אסינכרוני. הוא לא ערוץ מטריד. זה משהו שלא ניתן לומר על ערוצי מסרים מיידיים אחרים. יכול להיות שאחת הסיבות שכמות המיילים שנשלחת היא כל כך משמעותית, היא הסיבה הזו. זה לא הופך את האימייל לטוב יותר, זה רק הופך אותו למשהו אחר, למשהו שונה מפלטפורמות המסרים המיידיים. לחלק גדול מהאנשים יש כמות מוגבלת של מותגים שמעניינת אותם. יתרון נוסף של האימייל הוא יכולת החיפוש הקלה והנוחה בתיבת המייל, משהו שהרבה יותר קשה לעשות בוואטסאפ למשל. זה מדגיש את התפקיד של טאב קידומי המחירות, שאליו מנותבים אימיילים מחירתיים, באופן שאינו מפריע ליום-יום של אנשים.
As you mentioned, there's tons of reasons, use cases, where the more interruptive channels make a ton of sense. SMS makes an awful lot of sense for curbside pickup, in-store pickup, technician is about to arrive, your delivery has arrived, those kinds of messages where there's a lot of urgency and you really want to know about them and not miss them. SMS is gold. And I would say, way better than email for those kinds of use cases. So, as I think you alluded to, like understanding, the strengths and weaknesses of all the channels and where they shine and where they don't, and what the tolerances are in terms of frequency and expectations around messages is super important. And also like understanding message expectations, right? Like if you were designing a campaign that you would run across channels, you wouldn't send the same message to email, to SMS, to social. You wouldn't do that, right? You would make sure you understand what are the opportunities, what are the message expectations and behaviors that you can really tap into each of those channels. In social, hopefully, you would be trying to engage people in a very different way than you would via email and even SMS. So understanding the differences is really key to being able to optimize that message and that experience across all of your channels.
ישנם יתרונות לערוצי המסרים המיידיים למשלוח הודעות דחופות שאנחנו לא רוצים שנמנים יפספסו. כמו למשל, הודעה על חבילה שהגיעה, עיכוב במועד הגעה של טכנאי ועוד דוגמאות. יש גבול לסבלנות של נמנים לשימוש בערוצי המסרים המיידיים להודעות שיווקיות. צריך להבין את היתרונות והחסרונות וגם את הציפיות של נמנים מכל אחד מהערוצים. אם יש לך קמפיין שאתה הולך לעשות בו שימוש ברב ערוציות, אתה תרצה לעשות שימוש נכון בכל אחד מהערוצים, גם בהתאם לתאום הציפיות של לקוחות מאותם ערוצים. לא תרצה למשל לשלוח את אותה ההודעה בכל הערוצים. שאלתי את צ'אד ווייט האם לדעתו הודעת נטישת עגלה בוואטסאפ היא abuse של הערוץ.
Well, I guess it depends on the signal, right? Like, not to like go too deep, but like, I think one of the things I think is really important to understand about triggers is signal strength, especially around something like a cart abandonment or a browse abandonment, right? If somebody goes to a website and they're on a page for 2 seconds and then they abandon that page. Like, is that worthy of a browse abandonment email? It probably isn't. That's a really, really weak signal. But if they were to be on that page for a much longer period of time, or if they went to that page and then went back to that page, subsequently and spent some time there, that would be a much stronger signal. Same thing with a cart abandonment. If I put a $1 item in my shopping cart, is that worthy of a cart abandonment email? Probably not. In my book, depending on, again, what it is that you sell. Maybe you sell a lot of really inexpensive items and maybe it makes sense. But for most retailers, most e-commerce companies, that's probably not doing it. However, if I were to put $1,000 worth of merchandise in my cart and abandon that, that's probably not a single cart abandonment email. And maybe it would make a lot of sense to use a more interruptive channel like SMS or WhatsApp or some kind of push message versus just sending an email. Because the stakes are so much higher. You've got a lot more revenue at risk. So I'm a big fan of like sort of proportional response and understanding what those signals are and, kind of making sure you're responding appropriately to the signals that you're getting.
זה תלוי בחוזק הסיגנל, אומר לי צ'אד ווייט. אם לקוח שהה 2 שניות בדף אינטרנט, האם זה פרופורציונלי לשלוח לו מייל נטישה דפדפן? כנראה שלא. באופן דומה, עבור רוב הכימונאים, אם לקוח השאיר מוצרים בשווי $1 בסל, זו כנראה אינה תגובה פרופורציונלית לשלוח לו הודעת וואטסאפ או הודעת מסר קצר אחר. אבל אם לקוח שם מוצר בשווי $1,000 והוא לא מגיב לאימייל נטישת עגלה, אולי כן. זה תלוי בנסיבות. צריך לשאול את עצמנו כל הזמן, האם זו תגובה פרופורציונלית? You remind me a scene from the White House. What's a proportional response?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're the chief executive of the email channel, so use your power responsibly.
CRM.Buzz.
דיברנו על אימייל קילרס. תכף נדבר על סכנות חיצוניות נוספות לערוץ האימייל, אבל קודם לכן אני רוצה לשאול אותך על הסכנות הפנים-ארגוניות לאימייל מרקטינג. האם תוכל לומר מהם הרוצחים הפנימיים של אימייל מרקטינג שנתקלת בהם בארגונים?
I think it's really difficult to kill an email program. I mean, one of the kind of sad truths about email marketing is that you can do email marketing like kind of not all that well and still generate like a decent ROI. Which, I think
That's sad.
it's sort of sad. And it means that a lot of brands like leave a lot of money on the table because they're just like, I think there's a lot of like people settling for good enough. They're like, oh, that's good enough, especially if they're comparing it to, their TV or radio ads or other traditional channels. The ROI on email is so strong that a lot of people are like, oh, all right, that's great. Email's not on fire. Email's doing fantastic, so we'll just turn our attention over to these other channels that are really struggling and let's invest a lot of money there. That's the opposite of what I would do. I do think that's a big part of the reason why email is chronically underfunded is that there's a lot of like good enough, a lot of people settling. And I also think that sometimes like people like misunderstand, like they misunderstand return on investment. I've heard a lot of brands, kind of laud that they get like 80-to-1 return on investment with email. I heard one company bragging about how they get like 100-to-1 return on their investment in their email marketing program. And to me, like they were super proud of that. And to me, hearing that, I think, oh my gosh, you're doing it totally wrong. Like
It was one of the ESPs, yeah?
There was one ESP recently talking about like what a high ROI all of their clients get. And so like when I see numbers like that, I think, oh my goodness, like you were doing this all wrong. You're stopping way too soon. You're grabbing all the low-hanging fruit and you're skipping off on your merry way when you're just leaving like a tree full of fruit. Like you just reach up a little bit higher. You should be doing more work and getting lower returns, right? If you're achieving 100-to-1, return on investment on your email marketing program, you need to be looking for more programs, more initiatives that you can do that would get 80-to-1, 60-to-1, 40-to-1, even 20-to-1. Like there's a ton more things you could be doing that would be, yes, delivering lower returns on your investment, but you would be growing your total return, your absolute return. You'd be growing, you'd be making more money, which is the whole point. Nobody sets out, you want good margins for sure, but most companies, like given the chance to have really high rates of return versus really high returns, would choose really high returns. And so I feel like there's like a little bit of like, we've kind of done our industry a little bit of a disservice on focusing on ROI so much, because I think it leads to people stopping way too soon. And leaving just tons and tons of money on the table. So lately the analogy I've been using is a Vegas analogy. Like imagine if you go to Vegas and you find a penny slot machine and you put in 100 pennies and it spit out $40, $80, whatever. Would you stop? Would you just get up and leave? I don't think most people would, but that does seem to be what's happening. I would stay there and keep feeding in pennies until my return went way down. But if it kept giving me, 40-to-1 returns on my time sitting there and on my money, like I would stay at the seat. But it seems like a lot of brands are getting up from the seat.
לדעתי מאוד קשה להרוג תוכניות אימייל מרקטינג, אומר לי צ'אד ווייט. האמת העצובה על אימייל מרקטינג היא שאפשר להשיג תוצאות טובות למרות ביצוע גרוע. אני חושב שחלק מהטעויות שמשווקים וארגונים עושים, היא שהם משווים אימייל מרקטינג לערוצים ופעילויות אחרות שלהם. ה-ROI, החזר ההשקעה על אימייל, הוא כל כך גבוה, גם אם עושים אותו גרוע. זה גורם לארגונים להסתפק בתוצאות שהם מקבלים מאימייל מרקטינג, ולהסיט את התקצוב לערוצים אחרים שכביכול סובלים יותר. זו אחת הסיבות שאימייל מתוקצב בצורה נמוכה. אני חושב שאנשים לא מבינים את המשמעות של החזר השקעה על אימייל. כשאני שומע ארגונים מתרברבים על החזר השקעה גבוה שהם מקבלים באימייל מרקטינג, אני תופס את הראש ואומר, אתם עושים את זה לא נכון. אתם כותבים רק את הפירות הנמוכים, עושים רק את מה שקל, והולכים הלאה בלי לעשות מאמץ נוסף. אתם צריכים לחפש יוזמות ותוכניות שישיגו החזרי השקעה נמוכים יותר. תעשו עוד מאמץ והושיטו את היד גבוה יותר, כדי לקטוף גם פירות שנמצאים יותר גבוה על העץ. זה הרבה יותר הגיוני כלכלית, לא להשאיר כל כך הרבה כסף על השולחן או על העץ. סכנה נוספת שעורבת לאימייל מרקטינג היא היעדרם של תקנים. שאלתי את צ'אד, מדוע חברות טכנולוגיה גדולות לא מדברות בינן לבין עצמן, כדי לנסות יחדיו לייצר אחידות של תקנים.
You're adorable, Sela. I mean, having companies come together and talk together and strategize together. Yeah, no, I mean, this is like something that we've been calling for ever.
Yeah.
I mean, a long, long time. Like, you know, the fact that email clients all implement dark mode differently is frustrating. The fact that they don't support the same rendering code base, right? Yeah. They don't all support CSS interactivity. They don't all support the same fonts. Like, you know, for a long time, Microsoft didn't support animated GIFs, which was, I don't even know what to say about that. Yeah, but yeah, the standards, I mean, there's been a call for, you know, like the internet, you know, W3 has very clear web standards and has for a very long time. And there just isn't anything remotely similar for email, seemingly for no good reason. Like there's no compelling reason for there not to be more cohesive, you know, email code standards. I don't see the reason. I mean, if we all agree that the web needs universal standards, why not email? But this has been something that, you know, we've been harping on for a very long time. It hasn't changed. Yeah. And we have now, like, again, like really big disconnects, you know, and you see it, you know, with things like schema, you see it with things like CSS-based interactivity, AMP for email. Like you can glimpse really promising functionality that withers and stays small because of a lack of broader support, because it just doesn't have enough critical mass for marketers, you know, to ask about it. I mean, we're literally, like, at this point, none of our clients are talking about AMP for email. Like, none of them. And it just, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for them because they can't reach enough of their subscribers to make it worth all the effort.
זה משהו שאנחנו רוצים מאז ומתמיד. העובדה שאימייל קליינטס, תוכנות שבהם קוראים אימיילים, שונות מטמיעות דארק מוד למשל באופן שונה, היא מאוד מתסכלת. לא כל האימייל קליינטס תומכים ב-CSS, לא כולם תומכים באותם פונטים. הרבה זמן מייקרוסופט לא תמכה ב-Animated GIFs. לאינטרנט יש תקן, W3 זה תקן שקיים כבר המון זמן, תקן אחיד. לא ברור למה באימייל אין תקן אחיד. אין סיבה שאני יכול לחשוב עליה, למה אין אחידות בנושא הזה. זה יוצר פער גדול וגם בעיות של אימות של הדברים החדשים כמו סקימה או CSS או AMP for email, שזה אימייל אינטראקטיבי, שלא מגיעים אל המסה הקריטית בגלל שאין אימוץ של ספקיות האימייל ותוכנות האימייל. למשל, בארצות הברית, אף אחד מהלקוחות של אורקל לא מדבר על AMP for email.
It's super low. It's like super low. And it's not really all, like, it's not AMP's fault. There's been a number of sort of headwinds, including the pandemic, the pandemic, the Great Resignation, the fact that AMP for mobile went away. There's a lot of confusion about like, oh, is AMP dead? And like, all right, what is it? All right, is it the mobile AMP or is it AMP for email? Like, it's not, the branding is not great. Also, Gmail Google stepped sort of away from AMP for email because they didn't want it to be a Google thing. They wanted it to be an industry standard. But when they stepped away, it definitely created a vacuum that didn't get filled. But I do think that there was sort of environmental, again, the pandemic, the Great Resignation, people, needed to get faster and get leaner. And AMP for email doesn't help with either of those things because it increases email production time quite a lot. So I think the timing was just, unfortunately, like really poor. But ignoring all of that, really the only thing that can change it really is as if Apple were to support AMP for email. Here in the US, that's what it would take to change things. Microsoft, like they did an experiment with it and then they shut it down. I don't even think if they were to adopt it, if that would be enough. I think you really need Apple to support it before it becomes truly viable here in the US, just because they have so much market share. And I don't see that changing because of their strong stances around privacy. I think it would be very easy for them to say, hey, look, allowing more functionality in the email opens up potentially more privacy risk. So I don't see them doing it, which, again, makes me sad because I think AMP for email does a lot of really cool stuff that would be exciting for brands.
האימות של AMP for email הוא מאוד נמוך, וזה לא בהכרח אשמת התקן. היו כמה דברים שגרמו לכך, כמו חוסר התמיכה במובייל. גוגל רצתה שזה יהפוך לסטנדרט, וזה לא קרה, והיא קצת נסוגה מקידום הנושא. מגפת הקורונה ואחריה ההתפטרות הגדולה לא בדיוק תרמו לזה. AMP הוא קצת קורבן של הטיימינג שבו הוא הושק. אני חושב שכדי ש-AMP יקבל את הדחיפה שהוא כל כך צריך, לפחות בארצות הברית, זה אם אפל תתמוך בו כתקן. אבל אני לא רואה את זה קורה, כי תיאורטית AMP עשוי לפתוח שאלות שקשורות בפרטיות, זה משהו שלדעתי אפל לא תיתן לו לקרות.
I mean, if you look at the data, what it shows you is that people are more inclined, dramatically more inclined to take actions when you pull some of that landing page experience into the email itself. So for instance, like I remember the first AMP for email experience that I had. It was a product review request from Home Depot, and I got it, and it has the fields right in the email, and you can just type right into it. And I swear I didn't realize that I was still in the email until I hit submit, and then it opened up my browser to confirm the submission of the review. It was at that point that I actually realized I hadn't been on the web all that time, that I was still in the email. And that was really amazing because one of the things that people don't understand is that the amount of friction between an email and a landing page is tremendous. They see it as one click. They're very dismissive. They'll say oh, well, that's just one click. But we see across all web experiences, adding an additional click to a process reduces completion, cuts off journeys prematurely. You want to limit that. And so time and time again, be it AMP for email or video and email, when you pull content into the email and reduce the number of clicks that it takes to take action, it has tremendous effects. I know that it's been a while since I've looked at video and email view rates and stuff, but the last time I looked at it, emails that we had embedded video in, for clients had twice or more the uptake of forcing them to click through to a landing page and watch there. Now, I think it's an entirely different argument about whether or not, what's the value long term of getting people on a landing page sooner to like continue their journey. But there's no doubt that in terms of asking them to do a particular thing, if you can, whether it's watching a video, completing a form, browsing a limited selection, whatever, if you pull it into the email, people do it at much higher rates, like 2x, 3x.
אני זוכר שבפעם הראשונה שנתקלתי ב-AMP for email, מילאתי טופס שהיו בו שדות בתוך המייל. לא שמתי לב שאני בתוך המייל עד שהוא עברתי לדף חיצוני, אחרי שלחצתי על כפתור האישור. AMP לאימייל מאפשר חוויה שמזכירה דפדפן בתוך האימייל עצמו, מה שמאפשר לבצע הזמנות, למלא טפסים וכדומה, בתוך גוף האימייל עצמו. הנתונים מראים שככל שמורידים את החסמים, האינגייג'מנט עולה. אנחנו רואים תופעה דומה כשמטמיעים וידאו בתוך האימייל. דבר דומה מתרחש גם כאן. פי 2 מהאנשים ראו את הוידאו שהוטמע בתוך האימייל, לעומת שליחתם להקליק כדי לצפות בדף נחיתה חיצוני. כשמורידים את החסמים, המעורבות של אנשים תעלה פי 2, אפילו פי 3, זה משהו שיכול לשנות משמעותית את האפקטיביות של אימייל. תמיד אמרנו שאימייל הוא לא בבעלות של אף ענקית טכנולוגית, ולכן הוא ערוץ מבוזר. בשנים האחרונות התפיסה הזאת מעט מתערערת. ענקיות טכנולוגיות כמו אפל וגוגל משפיעות ויוצרות ריכוזיות רבה בערוץ האימייל. שאלתי את צ'אד ווייט, מה דעתו בנושא?
I'll be honest, I was really kind of shaken by Apple and mail privacy protection, because that does, the fact that they were able to have such a big impact all on their own in certain geographic areas really speaks that there has been quite a bit of concentration. AOL and Yahoo have gotten much weaker over the years, and Microsoft has a very strong presence in corporate markets, but Gmail has made a lot of headway there with G Suite. So yeah, I do get concerned that a lot of the infrastructure is now run by Gmail on sort of the back end and Apple on the front end. So it has become quite concentrated, which does alarm me, but at least it's not owned by one. But yes, I think that's a very valid concern. I think it is becoming a little bit uncomfortably more closed than open, but the fact that you still do have a number of really large players that control the marketplace. And I think your point is really good about understanding your region. The email marketplace definitely varies really radically depending on where you go in the world. The US is very different than, say, India, where Gmail has a really strong hold, and Android devices are used very prevalently, and so you have AMP for email doing really well in India, which is really exciting to see. Like, they're showing us what email could kind of be in a more interactive form, which I find fascinating and exciting, and it also makes me sad that we don't have that ability here in the U.S. because of the market shares. I wish here in the U.S. AMP for email was really a viable approach, but it's arguably not. Because the uptake is so incredibly low. But also, looking at sort of local differences, not only just within email, but within digital marketing. For instance, in China, and I know large parts of Africa, they sort of skipped email and they went right to mobile. So SMS and app-based messaging are massive, in those places.
Like
and
super
email
apps.
is very small.
Like those super apps?
Right. In China, they got the super apps, which, now, of course, there's some folks here in the U.S. who are thinking about making super apps as well. I know Elon Musk thinks that somehow he's going to pull that off. I'm deeply skeptical of his ability to succeed. As you know, I recently wrote an Only Influencer blog post about who I thought were more likely to pull it off. folks like Walmart, and I would love to see maybe Amazon take a stab at it. That would be exciting. I'd love to see Amazon get into the email space as an email client, as a mailbox provider. I think that would make a ton of sense for them. So I laid out my argument there in that blog post.
Everything in place, just plug the Lego and run it almost.
Yeah, I mean, and Amazon is a technology company, so it would make just a ton of sense for them. So we'll see. Fingers crossed. I'd love to see that, and I'd love, that would introduce some more competition here in the U.S. in the email marketing landscape. So, or in the email client, marketplace. I'd love to see that. I think that would be healthy for us, but I think it'd also be really exciting for Amazon.
העובדה שלגופים כמו אפל וגוגל יש כוח ריכוזי כל כך בהחלט מדאיגה אותי. AOL ויאו נחלשו במרוצת השנים, מייקרוסופט בנתה אחיזה משמעותית בארגונים, כעת גם גוגל נכנסת לזירה הזאת. צריך לזכור אבל שטריטוריות שונות מתנהגות באופן שונה. ארצות הברית והודו הפוכות למשל. בהודו, AMP for email מאוד מאוד חזק בזכות חדירות מאוד גבוהה של אנדרואיד וג'ימייל. בארצות הברית, אפל מאוד חזקה, והאימוץ של AMP for email הוא אפסי. אפשר לראות טריטוריות כמו אפריקה שבהן השוק לא משתמש באימייל, הכל קורה בתוך סופר אפס, שזו ריכוזיות מסוג אחר. סופר אפס קיימות גם בסין, גם אילון מאסק מדבר על הרצון שלו להפוך את טוויטר, אקס דהיום, לסופר אפ. הייתי רוצה לראות את וולמארט או אמזון נכנסות לתחום האימייל כספקיות אימייל. מבחינת אמזון, שהיא חברת טכנולוגיה שמניעה הרבה מאוד חברות אחרות, זה יכול להיות מאוד קל והגיוני מבחינתם. דיברנו על הריכוזיות של אפל וגוגל, אז בוא נדבר על ההשפעה של שתיהן, לפחות כרגע על עולם האימייל מרקטינג. נתחיל באפל. אפל הציגה את שינוי הפרטיות שלה בספטמבר 2021, שינוי שנקרא אפל MPP, Mail Privacy Protection. תוכל לפרט מה המשמעות שלו עבור מדברים?
Mail Privacy Protection is a privacy feature that was released by Apple, I guess coming
September
up on...
21.
Yeah, so about a year and a half ago. And now it's reached essentially kind of full adoption. Like essentially everybody has it on Apple Mail platforms, whether it's mobile, tablet, or desktop. Yeah, it gets like turned on at like 95% plus, rates, like really high. And it does a lot of things. It blocks forwards, it blocks device information, it obscures the IP location by using relays. But the biggest thing that it does is that it obscures opens. And it does this by essentially opening every email and sort of flooding, email systems with tons and tons of fake opens. And so there are real opens in all of these auto-generated opens, but you can't easily tell which ones are the real ones and which ones are the fake ones, which of course is absolutely by design. That is what MPP is trying to do. It's trying to say, hey, like you shouldn't know when somebody opens it. So we're just going to open everything for the most part and make it really hard for you to tell, which individuals are opening emails.
It's a huge project on Apple's side to do that. It's a huge and maybe expensive move.
Yeah,
privacy,
they definitely increased their costs quite a lot because they needed a lot more computing power to do all of those opens and load up all of those images, which early on they seemed to really struggle with, but they seem to be fine with now. Yeah. So that's what MPP does, and it causes a lot of problems for email marketers who are largely trying to do the right thing. And so, God, this is such a rabbit hole.
I know.
But your question is your original question was, about opens and how not all ESPs are kind of being transparent about what's happening. And you're absolutely right. Some ESPs don't seem to be mentioning at all, like it's a thing. some ESPs like Oracle, we take out auto opens. We set those aside. You can still get access to them, but we don't include them in open reporting. And I feel great about that decision. That's not the decision that everybody makes, but this is a decision I feel very comfortable with. Because in the average case, 80%-ish of those opens are going to be junk. It's just going to be confabulated fake opens by Apple. And I'm not aware of any other data source that a company would look at and say, oh, we know this is 80% just garbage data. Let's use that. So I feel very comfortable with us removing it. But what that does is that definitely suppresses opens. It lowers that baseline. Now, other ESPs have just added in all the auto-generated opens, and they've achieved like a new, much higher baseline. I think part of the problem there is that it makes it harder to see fluctuations in the real open behavior because it's masked by all of this data. And then, so yet another approach has been to try to adjust open rates by looking at the proportion of auto-generated opens that a particular sender is generating, and then using a little bit of math to kind of back it out and then make assumptions about, if your open rate among non-MPP users is X, let's scale it up. So for instance, I know that MailChimp does this, and some other ESPs do it as well. They kind of
estimate,
remove all the auto, but then they kind of add in a portion based on what the real opens rates are. And so you have comparable numbers. But it's definitely confusing. And your point about doing retargeting based on opens or lack of opens can be problematic today, depending on what the ESP is doing. And then also journeys that are based on opens, which I know are really popular among a lot of B2B brands. Those are also deeply problematic. I wrote an article about that for Marketing Profs a number of months back. And I came up with I think it was 8 different strategies that you could adopt to kind of get around this problem, but none of them were, none of them were as good as just having access to real opens. So there's all kinds of concessions that we're having to make because of MPP.
אפל MPP עושה כמה דברים שקשורים להגנה על פרטיות בכל מכשירי אפל. אחוז האימוץ שלו מאוד גבוה, ועומד על למעלה מ-95%. MPP עושה כמה דברים כגון מיסוך סוג המכשיר, הסתרת מיקום כתובת ה-IP, מניעה של העברות מייל, אבל הדבר המשמעותי ביותר שהוא מציף את מערכות הדיבור בכוונה תחילה בנתוני פתיחות שווא. זה מאוד מקשה על מדברים לזהות מי באמת פתח את האימיילים שלהם ומהן פתיחות השווא. הרבה מערכות דיבור מתעלמות מ-MPP כלל וממשיכות להציג סטטיסטיקה מנופחת ומאוד לא מדויקת של נתוני פתיחות. זה מאוד בעייתי כלפי הלקוחות של אותן מערכות דיבור, אומר צ'אד. יש מערכות שמחריגות את הפתיחות שמקורן ב-MPP או מאפשרות להציג סטטיסטיקה עם או בלי MPP. יש מערכות אחרות כמו מיילצ'ימפ שעושות מוניפולציה שמתחשבת ב-MPP כדי לייצר סטטיסטיקה משוערכת. לדעתי גם זה יוצר אתגר אחר כי זה מקשה לעקוב אחרי שינויים ומגמות של פתיחות אימיילים. זו מתמטיקה שחלק מהמערכות עושות טוב יותר מאחרות. MPP בהחלט מבלבל. מסעות לקוח שמבוססים על פתיחות אימיילים פשוט בעייתיים בסיטואציה הזאת, עם עצי ההחלטה במסע הלקוח מתבססים על פתיחות אימיילים. ענקית דומיננטית אחרת שיש לה השפעה על אימייל מרקטינג היא גוגל וג'ימייל. השמיים נפלו ב-2013 כשג'ימייל הציגה את הטאבים, וביניהם את טאב קידומי המחירות הידוע לשמצה. שאלתי את צ'אד ווייט, מה דעתו על טאב קידומי המחירות?
Yeah, I remember writing about tabs when it came out, and my advice is the same as it was back then. The sky is not falling. This gives consumers a way to manage their email flows better. And I know there was a lot of talk about, and even sometimes today we hear folks talking about like, oh, how can I get in the primary tab? And way back in 2013, like I compared the primary tab to being like knocking on someone's front door, being a door-to-door salesman versus the promo tab being like the mall. I think most retailers, most e-commerce companies today would rather be in the mall than going door to door, knocking on people's doors and interrupting them. And I think that analogy still holds water today. Can your emails be more open if you land in the primary tab? Absolutely. But opens are not the goal, right? The goal is to be welcome and to be engaged with. And you can absolutely draw all kinds of negative attention to yourself by going around and knocking on everyone's door in a neighborhood. That's generally not the way to be successful. You really want to be where people expect you to be. I think in general, marketers, maybe catch a little bit of this from advertisers. They're like very obsessed about grabbing attention, and you'll often see things about like attention grabbing subject lines and things like that. And I don't think that it's about attention at all, because with email marketing, they've already opted in to hear from you. So the attention grabbing has already happened. And now it's a question of relevance. It's all about relevance, not attention grabbing tactics. It's relevance tactics, which are different, because most of the time when people talk about attention grabbing, they're talking about stunts, they're talking about generating curiosity, and those kinds of things don't always support a respectful, ongoing relationship. So I would tell people not to be concerned about tabs at all. I sometimes hear people suggest that the promotions tab isn't the inbox.
Yeah, it's the spam folder.
They think of it as being like the spam folder, and it's not. It's absolutely the inbox. And if people, really love your emails and they don't want it in their promo tab, they'll move you into the inbox. You shouldn't ask them; they'll just do it on their own. But like people, they want to control their inbox and they want to prioritize. And frankly, I think most brands, if you again are a retail or an e-commerce brand or whatever, like I think you want to be in that promo tab, because that's where people go when they're ready to shop and they're ready to make decisions. I think that's where you want to be when that happens. And like, it'll be on the subscriber's time, rather than you trying to force the moment and interrupt them and butt in to the conversations that they're having, in their primary tab. So that would be my rant about tabs. I think it's like massively overblown.
השמיים לא נופלים, והדעה שלי בעניין הזה לא השתנתה במהלך העשור מאז שטאב קידומי המחירות הושק. משווקים יותר מדי אובססיביים בעניין הזה של הגעה לטאב הראשי. נתתי בתור דוגמה איש מחירות שמתדפק על דלתות של אנשים. אנשים לא ממש אוהבים את זה. זהו הטאב הראשי. לעומתו, כשאנשים נכנסים לטאב קידומי המחירות, הם במוד של קניות, כמו כשהם נכנסים לקניון. האם המטרה היא פתיחת אימיילים או אינטראקציה חיובית עם האימיילים? השוואת הטאב הראשי וטאב קידומי המחירות מבחינת אחוזי הפתיחה היא לא נכונה. ברור שיהיו יותר פתיחות בטאב הראשי, אבל במחיר של משיכת תשומת לב שלילית והפרעה לנמענים. מדובר באנשים שכבר נרשמו לדיבורים שלכם, אז אולי זה מיותר לתפוס שוב ושוב את תשומת ליבם. אולי עדיף להיות רלוונטיים עבורם במערכת יחסים מכבדת וארוכת טווח. עניין אחר הוא שמדברים חושבים שטאב קידומי המחירות זה ספאם. כמובן שזה לא נכון. נמענים רוצים לשלוט בתיבת המייל שלהם. אם נמענים גררו את המיילים שלכם לטאב הראשי כי הם אוהבים את המיילים שלכם, זה מצוין, אבל זו לא המטרה. דיברנו על הגורמים הפנים ארגוניים שמשפיעים על אימייל מרקטינג, דיברנו על משפיעים חיצוניים שקשורים בכך שהערוץ הפך לפחות מבוזר ויותר מרוכז, ועל ההשפעה של ענקיות טכנולוגיות על הערוץ. אילו השפעות נוספות יהיו לדעתך על ערוץ האימייל?
I mean, like in terms of events, I think things like MPP has definitely been a major event that sort of caused like sort of a sea change of thinking. I think the end of third-party cookies is sort of a similar technological event that is causing people to really reevaluate how they go to market, how they build relationships, you know, how they acquire data, what they do with it. But I think if I look ahead at what's really going to move the industry in the years ahead, at the end of the second volume of my book, I talk about 4 things that are really going to drive the future. And here, let me just look at that real quick. So the first one is tighter privacy regulations and restrictions. So things like MPP, things like the end of third-party cookies, there's going to be more of that. I also think that here in the U.S., only a matter of time before canned spam is going to be replaced by something that resembles a modern privacy and anti-spam law. So that, I mean, we're so far behind the rest of the modern world at this point. With our regulations, we're so out of sync with what consumers expect. It's, you know, and we have now a variety of state laws like CCPA in California. There's now a bunch of other states who have passed laws. And so at a certain point, there's going to be so many state level laws that it's going to be really complicated for companies to be in compliance with all of them because they have all these different stipulations. And so that's what's going to drive us towards a new national standard. So I'm excited about that because I think canned spam is just a horrible, horrible law that just wildly sets the wrong expectations for how brands should use email marketing and be successful at it. So that's number one. The second one is better omni-channel orchestration. You know, you were hinting at, you know, email with other channels. For a long, long time, it seems like we were always talking about email versus social, email versus SMS. And I think everybody realizes now that that's like a total false narrative, and that it's email with SMS, email with social, email with print, email with everything, and all of those other channels with email. You know, it's all about creating a cohesive brand experience across all of your channels. You know, that's what, you know, that's the core of what it is to be an omni-channel company. And so that's where I feel very strongly we're all headed. The third thing for the future is more AI and machine learning. And, you know, I'm sort of a near-term skeptic around generative AI, but a long-term optimist. So, you know, a lot of my current optimism is around machine learning and sort of traditional AI, data-based, not language models. But there's certainly a lot of cool things you can do with generative AI as well. And then the fourth and final thing, you know, that is going to drive the future is just ever-rising consumer expectations. That has been really the driver for a long time. That's going to continue to be like the North Star for brands, is that we're always chasing rising consumer expectations, and we have to keep pursuing that.
מבחינת אירועים משפיעים, MPP הוא בהחלט אירוע מכונן. לדעתי, גם ביטול קוקיז צד ג' שצפוי להיות אירוע טכנולוגי דומה, יחייב משווקים להעריך מחדש נושאים כמו מקורות דאטה, מה הם עושים עם אותה הדאטה ומהלכי יציאה לשוק. בסוף החלק השני בספר שלי, אימייל מרקטינג רולס, אני מדבר על 4 נושאים שישפיעו על העתיד של אימייל מרקטינג. הייתי רוצה לצטט לך מתוך הספר. הראשון, רגולציה משמעותית יותר כגון MPP וקוקיז צד ג'. בארצות הברית, בעתיד יהיה חוק פרטיות חדש, כלל ארצי, שדומה ל-GDPR באירופה, או ל-CCPA הקליפורני, שיענו טוב יותר על הציפיות של לקוחות. השני, Omnichannel Orchestration. בשנים שעברו, דיברו על נרטיב שגוי לדעתי של אימייל נגד ערוצים אחרים. אני צופה שהגישה העדכנית שהולכים אליה היא אימייל עם כל דבר. אימייל שמשתלב עם עוד ערוצים ולא במקומם. השלישי, AI ו-Machine Learning. יש הרבה דברים מגניבים שאפשר לעשות עם Generative AI, אבל אני מאמין שנראה התפתחות מודלים שעוסקים בדאטאבייס ולא רק בג'נרייטיב. הרביעי, ציפיות הלקוחות. הם הדרייבר המשמעותי. הם שיובילו את כוחות השוק וגם אותנו כמדברים. הזכרת שני נושאים שישפיעו על עתידו של אימייל מרקטינג. AI וציפיות לקוחות. אשמח שנרחיב בכל אחד מהנושאים. נתחיל מ-AI. איך היית רוצה לראות AI, את הבינה המלאכותית, משתלבת עם אימייל?
The topic of AI is a little bit confusing right now because I feel like the terminology has become kind of bloated and not used very accurately anymore. So like when folks are talking about AI, like my first question is, all right, what are we really talking about here? Are we talking about machine learning? Are we talking about generative AI? Or are we talking about AI algorithms? Like what are we talking about? Because those are all like three really, really different animals. And when we use a fair amount of machine learning today, and certainly the more advanced programs. So, send time optimization, that's machine learning. And that's great. That's really solid. There's nobody's arguing that like that is, doing any harm. It only does good. So that one's like really proven out. Traditionally, a lot of subject line optimization tools have been machine learning, right? Those are based on looking at past results, using subject lines with those words for a particular audience, and looking at the correlation between open rates and click rates to help you make choices about what words to make. Now we're talking about generative AI, which is completely different. It has no access to any past performance. It doesn't understand your audience. It doesn't have any intelligence that's related to your brand. And certainly in terms of like voice and tone and things like that, you can train generative AI up on that. But nobody's talking about like training it up on like performance. So it's not performative. I think that's the huge thing that really kind of like rocks my world, is that we went from talking about machine learning and AI as performance enhancers. These are performance drivers, intelligence drivers, to now we're talking about generative AI, and we're not talking about that at all. It's not about performance. It's about time savings. And can we do things faster? And that's a really different value proposition, because now it's all about like, being more nimble to a certain degree, but reducing labor costs is what we're talking about. And that's just wildly different than like the entire history of how we've talked about machine learning and AI in the past, which is, all right, how can we personalize at scale? How can we really use all the information we have about a particular describer to create a really relevant experience, to like demonstrate that we know that person on a one-to-one level. Generative AI doesn't really help with any of that. It can do other things. It can give you really great, it's really super good at like helping you brainstorm and help kind of identify maybe, topics or phrasings that you hadn't thought of. But it doesn't mean that it's actually going to be better. It's just brainstorming. So, I'm kind of I'm a short-term skeptic, long-term optimist with generative AI. It may even be that like the large language models, the LLMs that that ChatGPT and Bard are based on, that may not even be the model that long-term generative AI runs on. It may actually need a completely different model to really be successful at the level that people are kind of predicting. So this may actually be
premature,
an early gen. Early gen, right? It's part of the journey, right? But Yeah, I get a little bit frustrated with all these terms kind of being glommed together as just AI. And I've seen a number of presentations from really smart people that like switch gears talking about generative AI and ML and other types of AI applications and not acknowledging that these things are incredibly different from one another and have different constraints, different risks, different technological needs, and have wildly different use cases. And they talk about them like just interchangeably, like from bullet point to bullet point. It's really kind of shocking. I think it's just critical to understand that these things are wildly different.
יש בלבול מאוד גדול כיום בכל מה שקשור במונחים שנופחו ואנשים לא משתמשים בהם בהקשר הנכון. אני תמיד מנסה לרדת לעומקם של דברים. האם מדובר על AI? האם מדובר על Generative AI? או האם מדובר על אלגוריתמים של AI? אלו דברים שונים לגמרי. כבר כיום במערכות הדיבור המתוחכמות יותר, משתמשים במשין לרנינג. למשל, Send Time Optimization, שמתבסס על למידת מכונה ועובד יפה. גם כלים שמחוללים כותרות התבססו על למידת מכונה. הם הסתכלו על תוצאות של כותרות קודמות לקהל ספציפי, ובחנו קורלציה בין נתונים של פתיחה והקלקה, כדי להתאים כותרות חדשות. הכלים החדשים שצעצו לחילול כותרות שמבוססות על AI הם כלים ג'נרטיביים. אין להם שום גישה למידע קודם. הכלים האלה מתמקדים בקיצור זמן העבודה ביצירת קמפיינים. זה דבר אחר לחלוטין מיצירת ערך ושיפור ביצועים. אנחנו רואים היום כלים ג'נרטיביים מדורות ראשונים, הרבה מאוד דברים עשויים להשתנות בעתיד במודלים. אני חושב שכדאי לאנשים ששומעים שיח בנושא AI, לרדת לעומקם של דברים, כדי לא ללכת שולל אחרי מונחים מבלבלים. ומה לגבי ציפיות הלקוחות, או חוויית הלקוחות, בכל הקשור באימייל?
Email marketing definitely has an impact on the customer experience and can be really vital at setting expectations, answering questions before the questions arise, and certainly surfacing your brand values and your product and service offerings. So I think email is absolutely a big part of the customer experience. I feel like today when we're talking about customer experience, I'm very happy that we're talking a lot more about omni-channel, because that's about like, it's great if you treat your email subscribers well within the email channel. That's super. But being able to tie that behavior into the rest of the overall customer experience, so having visibility into those email interactions and folding that into the experiences that you have, in stores or in your SMS channel or elsewhere is vital, and vice versa. We're finally getting to that place, thanks to things like customer data platforms, that we can actually aggregate all of that customer data that's kind of currently locked in a lot of silos, bring it all together, and then make it accessible, clean it up, make it accessible to all the channels in pretty much real time, so that we can finally act like we know, like the right hand knows what the left hand is doing, which I think in a lot of cases isn't always the case. And we see, I think, a lot of cases on social media where consumers are really upset when we clearly don't know what's happening outside of the immediate channel. So you see folks, very angrily having their flights canceled and then getting promotional emails from the airline, an hour later, and being just incensed and like unsubscribing or marking those emails as spam and retaliation because, there's this disconnect between what's going on with the customer and then what's going on in that channel that the customer is engaging with. So I think that's ultimately the goal, is to treat customers like customers and not to treat them just like email subscribers or just like SMS subscribers or treat them just like web visitors, but to pull all of that together. And there's just massive opportunities there. And I feel like we've been talking about it a lot on the podcast, but it's, it's email with all of these other channels and all these other channels with email. And the goal is to create that cohesive customer experience across all the channels, regardless of where they choose to engage and when they choose to engage.
לאימייל יש תפקיד חשוב בחוויית הלקוח, ביצירת ציפיות, במענה פרואקטיבי על שאלות, בתמיכה בערכי המותג וחשיפת יתרונות המוצרים והשירותים. אנחנו מדברים כיום בהקשר של חוויית לקוח גם בערוצים אחרים, בתוך החנות, ב-SMS. הודות למערכות כגון CDP, אפשר היום לטייב את הנתונים בזמן אמת ולהנגיש אותם למערכות השונות. זה מונע מצב שבו הלקוח מרגיש חוויה שיד ימין בעסק לא יודעת מה יד שמאל עושה. למשל, זה מונע חוויה שלקוח שהטיסה שלו בוטלה מקבל מחברת התעופה מייל שיווקי תוך כדי האירוע, מה שפוגע בחוויה שלו, גורם לו להתרגז, אולי אפילו לדווח על ספאם או להסיר את עצמו מהדיבורים. זה שינוי גישה, להסתכל על לקוחות כאל לקוחות, לא כאל מנויים או נמענים, וליצור חוויה אחידה וטובה לאורך כל הערוצים שבהם הלקוחות בוחרים להיות באינגייג'מנט.
CRM.Buzz.
נעבור לנושא שקרוב לליבי, Deliverability. רציתי לשאול אותך, איך לדעתך נכון שהלקוחות יתייחסו לנושא האווירות?
So deliverability, obviously a huge topic area. I think the main thing to recognize today is that, one, there's no escaping a bad sender reputation. It used to be that your sender reputation was attached to your IP address only. And so if you got a bad reputation, you could shut down an IP address and you could start up a new one and you were kind of starting fresh. But now, sender reputations are also attached to your domain, which opens up a lot of things for sure. But the big thing is it means you can't run away from a bad reputation because you're taking your domain with you. Unless you're shutting down your company and starting up a whole new brand, you're taking that bad reputation with you. It also means that affiliates and salespeople, their behaviors can negatively impact and often do negatively impact your sender reputation because of what they are sending, because that behavior impacts your sender reputation attached to your domain. So that's big thing number one. Big thing number two about deliverability is that so much of it is now driven by engagement. It used to be spam complaints, negative reactions were really driving deliverability, driving sender reputations, and now it's really positive interactions. The inboxes want to see that your emails aren't just tolerated, but are engaged with. And engagement is just a massive, massive part of most mailbox providers' spam filtering algorithms. Certainly at Gmail, it's just enormous. So you want your subscribers to be opening your emails and doing other types of engagement. And there it gets a little bit tricky because of MPP, because everyone's talking about how opens aren't so important anymore. You really need to focus on clicks. But a lot of mailbox providers don't track clicks. That's not a part of their algorithm because they see that as, ironically, a breach of privacy to be tracking what you're clicking on. So, but Gmail can tell every time an email is read. And that's a really important distinction. We use open pixels to see, opens are something that we made up to approximate what is a read. The mailbox provider can always see when an email is being read by one of their users. Clicks are a great proxy for all these other behaviors that we can't see, such as starring, foldering, marking unread, and all these other positive things that can happen, that mailbox providers absolutely pay attention to. Last I heard, Gmail had hundreds of different factors that they looked at when determining deliverability. And we can't see the vast majority of those signals. So we don't have a lot of visibility into it. And still at this point, it's opens and clicks that are our best field of vision into this really expansive set of metrics and behaviors that mailbox providers use. But engagement is just absolutely critical, which is why, especially for large senders, MPP has been so devastating. It's because they're trying to do the right thing. They only want to send to people who are engaged, and now Apple has made it much more challenging for them to determine who's actually engaging with their emails. And unfortunately, I think in a lot of cases, it's caused senders to send more emails to people who are less engaged because you just can't tell. Which is really unfortunate. I think that's the thing for me that's sort of the most devastating about MPP, is that ultimately I feel like it's harmed the subscriber experience because a lot of people are going to get more emails than they would have gotten otherwise, and it's made it really challenging for brands to do the right thing and follow the rules that mailbox providers have set up. Ironically, even Apple. I think the language it might still be there. Maybe it's gone now, but like right after MPP launched and everyone was like, oh my gosh, well, how are we supposed to tell when people are opening our emails? At that point, if you went to like the Apple Mail, like Postmaster page, there was stuff saying how like the number one, way that you can get your emails delivered is to make sure your emails are getting engaged with. Yeah. And that's still the rule. That's still the rule there. It's still the rule at Gmail. It's still a rule everywhere. That's still the number one thing you can do. It's just MPP has made it really hard for us to then follow the rules that mailbox providers are laying out for us.
אווירות היא נושא ענק. ראשית, חשוב שלקוחות יכירו בכך שאין אפשרות להתחמק מרפיוטיישן שלילי. בעבר הסנדר רפיוטיישן היה משוייך רק לכתובות IP, ואילו כיום הרפיוטיישן קשור גם לדומיין. בעבר אם מדברים נתקלו בבעיות אווירות, הם יכלו להחליף כתובת IP ולבנות לה רפיוטיישן מחדש. בגלל שכיום נושא הרפיוטיישן משוייך לדומיין, עסקים לא יכולים להחליף את הדומיין בכל פעם שיש להם בעיה. אלא אם כן אתה ספמר. דבר נוסף שחשוב להכיר הוא ששותפים ועובדים של ארגון שמדברים מהדומיין של הארגון עשויים לגרום נזקים עצומים לרפיוטיישן כתוצאה מאימיילים שהם שולחים מהדומיין. דבר משמעותי נוסף הוא שחלק מספקיות האימייל הגדולות, כדוגמת ג'ימייל, מסתכלות כיום על איתותים חיוביים ולא רק על איתותים שליליים כגון דיווחים על ספאם. מבחינתם איתותים חיוביים הם נתוני אינגייג'מנט, הם רוצות לראות שהנמענים מעוניינים באימיילים שלכם. ספקיות האימייל כגון ג'ימייל יודעות כשנמענים פותחים את האימיילים. מבחינת מדברים, שינוי הפרטיות של אפל, MPP, יוצר סיטואציה של אחוזי פתיחה שאינם מדויקים, אבל השינוי של אפל לא מפריע לספקיות האימייל לדעת מי פתח את האימיילים. לאור שינוי הפרטיות של אפל, ההמלצה הייתה לעקוב אחרי הקלקות של אימיילים. העניין הוא שהרבה ספקיות אימייל אינן עוקבות אחרי הקלקות בגלל שזה עשוי לפגוע בפרטיות המשתמשים שלהן. אפל בעצמה היא ספקית אימייל, גם היא ממליצה לעקוב אחרי אינגייג'מנט. בגלל שאינגייג'מנט מאוד חשוב לנושא האווירות, למדברים מאוד קשה כיום לדעת מי באמת נמצא באינגייג'מנט. כתבת לאחרונה מאמר שמתאר את האבולוציה, את הדורות של אימייל דליברביליטי. חילקת אותם ל5 דורות. רציתי שתספר על המאמר, תתאר מה הם אותם 5 דורות, ורציתי לשאול אותך, האם אתה יודע לתאר מה יהיה הדור הבא של אווירות אימיילים?
Yeah, so that article actually was inspired by an old article that I wrote. I was doing some research and I stumbled across this old article I'd written for Media Post that was about the third age of email deliverability. And on reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, so much has happened since then. Let's like kind of fill in like the dots that have happened since then. So, I mean, the general concept is just to recognize how much email deliverability has changed over the last, say 2 decades plus. And so the first age of email deliverability is essentially like the Wild West, where there were really no rules. And like, if you had someone's email address, you could email them and they couldn't stop you. There was really no recourse. So that was the first age. The second age, mailbox providers gave us the report spam button. And that was super powerful. For the first time, we could say, I don't like this and I never want to see this again. And so that had a huge impact. But, brands, senders were savvy, and they knew that if their spam complaint rate was too high, they would get into trouble. So what they would do is they would bloat their list with tons of inactive subscribers to lower their complaint rate, because it's a percentage. So, very, very savvy.
Yeah.
And so, of course, the inbox providers saw this and they were like, that's not how it's supposed to work. That's not the spirit of how this is supposed to go. And so they started adding in engagement-based filtering. So that was, I think, a really pivotal moment, because it meant that the messages that senders sent to people not only had to be sort of tolerated, not hated, but they actually had to be engaged with. They have to be that they'll actually like those emails and interact with them. And so that was a huge, powerful moment. That was the start of the whole, quality over quantity kind of philosophy when it comes to building lists. The fourth age was when mailbox providers started attaching sender reputations, not just to IP addresses, but also to domains. And that was also a really huge moment, because it meant that if you had a bad reputation, you couldn't just abandon your IP addresses, spin up some new ones, and nice and clean, and you get to start all over with the same bad behavior. And so, now you really have to rehabilitate your bad behavior, because your domain, unless you're a spammer, really can't walk away from your domain. So it means you have to really take your sender reputation seriously. And then the fifth age, which is what we're in now, is that folks, primarily Apple, but not entirely just Apple, is making it harder for senders to see engagement. So it makes it a lot harder for senders to comply with the existing rules, which, as near as I can tell, have not changed at all because of Apple. Gmail has not changed their spam filtering algorithms. They have not stepped away from using engagement. It's my understanding that even Apple, which uses engagement-based filtering, has not changed its position. Engagement is still really critical to getting inbox placement at Apple. So the only thing that's changed is that it's way harder for senders to understand the engagement of their subscribers and do the right thing. And that has precipitated a lot of complexity, frankly, on the individual sender level, where they have to figure out this sort of new alchemy of understanding, really kind of the percentages, the likelihood that this particular subscriber is engaged with my emails based on, what I can see from inboxes, but also lots of other behavior where they're kind of guesstimating, engagement based on how engaged they are with the brand through other channels, and how much they're purchasing, or how often they're, visiting their website or engaged with their app. So a lot of fuzzy lines that are being connected, which, again, really complicated to work out. So that's the fifth age. That's where we're at right now. So, but your question was, what does the sixth age look like? And there, I think the sixth age really is going to be more on the sort of legal regulation front.
Privacy,
GDPR, I mean, especially here in the U.S. GDPR, CASL, laws in other industrialized nations are just way ahead of us here in the U.S. And frankly, those laws are aligned with consumer expectations, generally speaking. I think actually, it's laws always always lag consumer expectations, consumer desires and wants. They always lag. So, the law is not fast, right? So it's just by inherent existence is that it lags what people actually want. Now, here in the U.S., though, we're 20 plus years lagging behind consumer expectations around privacy, around email permission, and on and on and on. That cannot stand indefinitely. Here in the U.S., obviously, California has been leading the way and really pushing for modern privacy standards that are much more in line with GDPR. Not exactly, but like, in the ballpark. Yeah. And already multiple other states have passed privacy laws. And there's not a huge email component to these laws just yet, but it seems like it's only a matter of time. The more of these state-level laws that happen, the more pressure there's going to be to have a national standard, because complying with 20, 30 different state laws that are all slightly different is really hard for businesses. And at a certain point, enough businesses complain about how complicated this is. Hey, why don't we have one national standard? And that's what's going to happen. It's just the clock is ticking. So it's just a matter of time. And I think when that happens, we'll also see movement on email permission as well. I think these things will get tied together. There's been burbling for a long time about, updating CAN-SPAM, which is just so disastrously out of date. And, I like to say that, like, at this point, I think CAN-SPAM does harm, because there's still a lot of businesses that, like, step one, comply with the law. Yeah. And if that's where you stop, if you stop at step one, your email program is just going to get totally trashed, because CAN-SPAM sets all the wrong expectations for how to run a successful email marketing program. Yeah. So I think it does like a huge disservice to businesses that are like, okay, what's the most important thing? Let's comply with the law. If you did that, you would just be in dire straits, like, immediately, so it's not good expectation setting for businesses for how to behave. So I see that as like a major disservice to businesses. I think here in the U.S., we think, regulations bad. And so fewer regulations better. But I think there are a lot of instances where that's really not the case. And I think CAN-SPAM is absolutely one of those now, where we could just be setting much better floor, much safer floor for businesses to operate on in terms of running their email marketing program. So I think that's the sixth stage, is like much better, expectation setting for businesses, much better regulations and laws that, again, put businesses in a place to succeed and also aligns them with consumers, which also helps them succeed. So I think that's going to be the next big innovation in email deliverability. Regulations, better laws.
המאמר הזה נולד בעקבות שדרוג של מאמר קודם שכתבתי בנושא. מבחינת דורות, הדור הראשון היה תקופת המערב הפרוע. לא היו חוקים, לא היה סינון דואר אלקטרוני, אפשר היה לדבר בלי מגבלה. הדור השני, סינון כתובות IP של שרתי דיוור באמצעות RBL'ים, מילים ספמיות, וקיבלנו את כפתור דיווח על ספם. הדור השלישי, עידן האיכות לעומת הכמות, הוא בא להתגבר על תופעה שבה מדברים מתוחכמים, הוסיפו כמות עצומה של אימיילים של נמענים לא פעילים לכל דיוור, מה שהוריד באופן יחסי את אחוז הדיווחים על ספם, מתוך כלל האימיילים שנשלחו. כדי להתגבר על זה, ספקיות האימייל הוסיפו סינון אימיילים המבוסס על אינגייג'מנט. הדור הרביעי נשען על רפיוטיישן של דומיינים, ולא רק על רפיוטיישן של כתובות ה-IP, ואינגייג'מנט, חיובי, שלילי או ניטרלי, שממשיך להיות פקטור משמעותי. הדור החמישי הוא הדור שאנחנו נמצאים בו כרגע. מדברים נאלצים לנווט בעיוורון מסוים, ללא מדדי אינגייג'מנט ברורים, של מדדי פתיחת אימיילים, בעקבות שינוי הפרטיות של אפל MPP, ייתכן כי בעתיד ייווצר שיבוש גם בנתונים נוספים, נתוני הקלקה. הדור השישי כנראה יושפע מרגולציה וחוקי פרטיות שנותנים מענה טוב יותר לציפיות של לקוחות. רגולציה עושה טוב לאימייל מרקטינג. במדינות שבהן הוסדרו חוקי פרטיות, ניכרת עלייה בהגעה לאינבוקס. בארצות הברית אנחנו חייבים להחליף את החוק הכל כך מיושן של CAN-SPAM Act בחוקים מודרניים יותר, כגון CCPA, שנחקק בקליפורניה. החוקים האלה, החדשים, כמו GDPR ו-CCPA, מותאמים יותר לציפיות של לקוחות.
CRM.Buzz.
לסיום, איך מאזיני הפודקאסט יוכלו לעקוב אחריך, או לקנות את הספר שלך.
Absolutely. And yeah, please do. I hope that folks check out my book, and hopefully it's just what you're looking for. You can find me at emailmarketingrules.com. And from there, you can find me on social. You can find links to purchase Email Marketing Rules on Amazon, and lots of other details, including tons of great content that I've been publishing. So please do check me out at emailmarketingrules.com.
Amazing. תודה רבה, צ'אד.
Thank you, Sal. Thanks for having me.
אתם מוזמנים להירשם לבלוג שלנו. הקישור CRM.Buzz בדפדפן שלכם.
הפודקאסט בחסות דאטה מדיה, המלווה ומייעצת לחברות בארץ ובחול בפעילות אימייל מרקטינג אפקטיבית ואווירות אימיילים. אימייל דליברביליטי.